Now to Bangladesh, where political upheaval has created new problems for neighbouring India. Border officials on Monday said they'd arrested dozens of Bangladeshis trying to enter and escape the unrest. Ousted leader Sheikh Hasina has fled in exile to India. She had been a strong ally to the country's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. His government must now decide how to approach relations with Bangladesh's new interim government.
Student protests and week-long street demonstrations against the government led to the deposing of Bangladesh leader Sheikh Hasina. And as Hasina flees to India for safety after 15 years of increasingly autocratic rule, Nobel Peace Prize winner Muhammad Yunus takes the reins of power. But these upheavals and unrest could threaten stability in neighbouring countries, particularly India. Bangladesh shares a 4,100-kilometre-long porous border with India, which has long been concerned with threats of human trafficking and terrorist activities along its frontier states with Bangladesh. Delhi had been able to rely on Hasina's administration to ensure the security risks were kept in check. Prime Minister Narendra Modi had fostered close ties with her too. However, India has also welcomed Bangladesh's new interim government and is yet to decide on whether to provide long-term shelter to Sheikh Hasina after her arrival in India last week.
External Affairs Minister has already explained the approval for former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina to come to India was given at a short notice. The situation, as you know, is still evolving as far as Bangladesh is concerned. It would not be appropriate for me to comment on her plans.
Hasina's flight to India has provoked anger among some Bangladeshis towards their neighbour. And since her departure, reports say hundreds of Bangladeshi Hindus, who make up about 8% of Bangladesh's 170 million Muslim majority population, have tried unsuccessfully to flee to India.
We are also monitoring the situation with regard to the status of minorities. There are reports of initiatives by various groups and organizations to ensure their protection and well-being. We welcome that, but will naturally remain deeply concerned till law and order is visibly restored. Our border guarding forces have also been instructed to be exceptionally alert in view of this complex situation.
Along with monitoring its own border, India is now having to adjust and adapt to a changing situation in Bangladesh.
Well, let's turn to an expert on the region. Farwa Aamer heads South Asia Initiatives at the Asia Society Policy Institute. That's a think tank in New York City. Welcome to DW. Just talk us through some of the Indian calculation when it comes to deciding whether to allow Sheikh Hasina to stay.
It's what followed after the events of last week when Sheikh Hasina, of course, resigned and left Bangladesh. As the Minister of External Affairs, S.J. Shankar, said, that she arrived on a short notice and did not give many plans of, what the length of her stay might be. Will she get an asylum or not? What India did was it stood by its friend and in the moment, but there's a lot of recalibration that needs to happen in light of how the situation is evolving and developing in Bangladesh. And India will take steps accordingly. But for now, she remains to be in Delhi, and India is keenly observing that it's in the interest of India because it shares a border with Bangladesh. Bangladesh has been an important regional partner, will continue to be a regional partner regardless of what government comes in. And India would like to ensure that to manage its own sort of connectivity interests, infrastructural development interests, economic interests, and security interests. And for that, it will have to work with the new players that the interim government has offered, but also once the election takes place in Bangladesh and the new government comes in. So all of that will be factored into how India will see and evolve with the situation.
And do we have any indications about how Bangladesh's new Yunus-led government will view India?
There have been there are conjectures of all sorts. So, if the opposition comes to power, BNP visibly has never been a strong India supporter. Awami League, on the other hand, was more friendly towards India, and hence the sort of strengthening of the relationship that took place under Sheikh Hasina's rule. And BNP kind of led that India Out campaign also pre-elections last year, earlier this year before the election took place. So with the unison government, if the opposition parties become stronger, there might be concerns. But if India works well with the current political players in Bangladesh and finds itself, establishing itself as a partner, as a country, as an important neighbor that is standing by the people of Bangladesh, I don't see a lot of challenges because Bangladesh should also realize that it needs to stabilize its economy, one of the foremost policy initiatives it should be working on. And India will be an important partner that way. So its presence cannot do that.
And a word about how this political turmoil is being viewed by two other regional players, China and Pakistan.
Well, China, of course, also grew an important relationship with Bangladesh with Hasina's role. And it has a lot of economic interest in the country. It has a lot of geopolitical and strategic interest in the country, and it's closely monitoring the situation. As far as Pakistan is concerned, it offered solidarity to the people of Bangladesh, through social media and other statements. And it's also going to keep a keen eye. After all, stability in Bangladesh would mean stability in the region. It's very important. Economically and both security-wise also. And what we've seen in Bangladesh has important implications for neighboring countries, especially those that are undergoing similar sort of economic challenges, or sort of the plight of the youth, where joblessness or sort of inequality is present. So how do you tackle that in other countries where you have similar sort of potential for a movement like that? So it's a lesson for neighboring countries to see and to cater to domestic population and their challenges and address them foremost.
And a quick word then about what you're expecting from Bangladesh's military in the hoped-for return to democracy.
Well, as the Bangladesh military and the chief of army had said himself, they're taking temporary control. And we would, and as we've seen from the protests, the student protests, the youth-led movement, that they would not accept any army-led government. So we would, hope that Army's role is one that is supportive towards a free and fair election process and eventually a democratic government to take place in Bangladesh for the sustainability of peace and stability.
Thank you so much. Farwa Aamer from the Asia Society Policy Institute. Thank you.
Thank you.
To Bangladesh now, where the new interim government has said it is gravely concerned about reported attacks on Hindu and other religious minorities. Religious rights groups say they've recorded over 200 such incidents since the ouster of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. The new cabinet said it would immediately engage with communities and their representatives to find a solution. Hindus are the largest minority faith in the country, which is predominantly Muslim, and many of them are supporters of Sheikh Hasina's party. Zyma Islam is a journalist with the newspaper Dhaka Star. Welcome. How widespread have attacks on minorities in Bangladesh been since the fall of the old regime?
Thank you for the question. I'm a reporter with the Daily Star, and you're right. There were over 200 reported incidences of violence on minorities, but I do want to say that this is a conservative estimate. Not everyone is reporting the violence that they are experiencing, and not all of it is of the scale that can be reported. Like, someone probably came and tore off a bit of the roof of your house. That a bit of violence like that is probably falling off the radar, whereas more large-scale violence, for example, burning of homes, etc., are being reported. So it's more than that. It's right now it's the culture of fear that certain minority groups might be living in that I think is what's more pressing. Is that when the government fell and we have a hope for a new government, a new Bangladesh, the minorities seem to be a bit of an afterthought in this, the proceedings.
The other problem is that independent information on these attacks has been hard to get. What role is misinformation playing at the moment?
While the minorities themselves are fearing to speak out, at the same time, India, and especially Hindutva right-wing groups in India are really tweeting. They've really taken up, this issue, and they are some of the things that they're tweeting out are not necessarily correct. For example, we've noticed that there was this one right-wing Twitter account that tweeted out a photo of our cricketer Mashrafi bin Mortaza's house being set on fire and said that it was a minority cricketer's house being set on fire, whereas Mashrafi bin Mortaza is actually an Awami League parliamentarian, was an Awami League parliamentarian. So there are those, things that they are really capitalizing on the scenario. I think that's also a bit of their foreign policy. That's also a bit of how they perceive Bangladesh. They're perceiving Bangladesh as a place where minority groups are not safe. And I'm not saying that we have done our best in the past few days in protecting our minority groups. But at the same time, I think the kind of messaging that's being pushed out of, say, certain right-wing groups in India is not necessarily a reflection of the truth. It's more their fears that they're playing into.
Let's move on to the political shift that's underway. The son of the ousted PM warned over the weekend that the Awami League, Sheikh Hasina's party, should not be excluded from politics in Bangladesh. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
You're not going to be able to establish democracy in Bangladesh without the Awami League. It will never be accepted by half the people of the country, at least. So just as with the BNP, it's going to be between the BNP and Awami League. We need to work together. We are willing to meet with anyone, talk with anyone to restore democracy, to ensure peace, to restore law and order.
So, Zyma, how is the transitional government dealing with representatives of the old regime?
At the moment, the transitional government is not necessarily engaging with representatives of the old regime, is what we have seen. I do want to say that it's only been less than a week. It's not even been a week yet. And they've had their hands full trying to bring back control to a country that had completely fallen apart at the seams. So, for example, they're trying to get the police to come back to the police stations. And the police did rejoin work today. Some of the police stations have become operational starting today. They're trying to get protesters to not necessarily stop protesting, but also to bring a semblance of normalcy back to the streets. And I think at this point, communicating with the old regime has not necessarily been at their topmost priority. Instead of that, they're actually looking more towards reform, which means they're trying to see places. They're trying to reform places, for example, the Supreme Court, where the previous regime might have installed people of their own. They're trying to reform places where the previous regime had really infiltrated and politicized institutions.
Zyma, thank you very much for your analysis and bringing us up to date on that story.